Reddit relationship advice. Update. My fiancé was caught cheating the day before our wedding. Hey everyone. I am back with an update about my fiancé cheating on me the day before our wedding. As you know, she was cheating on me with an old boyfriend who has since passed away from a drug overdose. I accompanied her to the funeral. I know I shouldn't have, but I thought it was just the right thing to do. By no means. I plan on getting back with her, but I just figured I was helping someone in need. After I attended the funeral with her, we sort of went our separate ways. I didn't talk to her at all for about 3 weeks after the funeral. While I was at work one day, I get a text from Margaret asking, "Can we meet for dinner?" Her treat. I said, "Margaret, I have some work to do later. I don't think it's a good idea." She begs and pleads. I said, "Okay, I will text you later." At this point, I am perplexed as to why she wants to meet so badly. I think she is going to try and get back with me. Later that night, when we meet at a restaurant for dinner, Margaret starts crying over her food, then out of nowhere, she blurts out, "I love you. And I miss you." She goes on saying how sorry she was for what she did and how she hurt me. I told her, "Why are you asking me? I can't, I am still furious at what you did." I also told her, I can't trust her. It will never be like it was. She then asked, what could she do to regain my trust? I simply told her nothing because I am over you. She then put her head down and started crying a little. Again, I simply told her that you broke my trust and the timing, Margaret, the timing. I had no idea she was going to take it this hard. I then asked her, what would she do if she were in my shoes? I would forgive you. She said, without hesitation. I said, Margaret is not that easy for me. As the night goes on, she is still trying to convince me to give her another chance, despite me telling her no. Margaret then tells me she would do anything to regain my trust and that she is sorry for what happened. I am not sure how to feel about all of this. What is her motivation to try and get back with me? This has been a lot to process and it's hard because part of me still cares for her. But, at the same time, if I give her another chance, there is a strong chance that she will cheat again. I am not sure how to feel. I don't know if I should just let her go or give her the opportunity of proving herself. We wrap up our dinner date. I thanked her for dinner. She comes over to me and gives me a hug and walks away with tears. After the dinner date, a lot is going through my mind. The next day I call my dad and ask him, can we meet for lunch? He was surprised at first, but he said, sure, let's have lunch. So, as lunchtime comes around, I meet my dad at a restaurant nearby. He asked me, is everything okay? I said, yes. I then tell him that Margaret and I met for dinner last night. He said, why does she want to meet you for dinner? I said, I don't know, but she wants me to give her another chance. I asked my dad, what would he do? He said, do you still love her? I told him that no matter what we have been through in the past and how much she hurt me, there was a part of me that loved her. He asked, do you want to give her another chance to prove herself or just let her go? He also added, you don't want to spend your life wondering about what if. My dad was right. I don't want to spend the rest of my life thinking, what if. I thanked my dad for having lunch with me. Then I went back to work. As I finished up my workday, I drive home and when I pull up, Margaret is at my door. I am thinking to myself, what is she doing here? I asked Margaret, why are you here? She says, I can't give up. Please give me another chance. I said, Margaret, I can't, it would not be in my best interest to give you another chance. She says, why? I say to her, you know why, we just went over this last night at dinner. As I am talking to her, I unlocked the door to my house and walk in. Margaret is right behind me, still pleading. We get into the living room and then she tells me she still loves me and just can't give up so easily. She again asked me, what can she do to regain my trust? I finally yelled at her and tell her, you can't, you will never be able to regain my trust. At that point, she went silent, dropped her head and started crying. She walks out and leaves. After that, I didn't hear from Margaret for 2 weeks. I figured she got the message when I yelled at her. I was wrong. I get home from work one day, there is a knock at my door. I asked, "Who is it?" The voice on the other side of the door, "It's Margaret." "Please, can we talk?" she says. I opened the door. Margaret is on her knees with their hands interlaced. Like she is praying. I said, "What are you doing? Get up. Why are you here?" She says to me, "Please consider giving me another chance." I said, "Margaret, why do you keep asking?" She says, "You know, I love you and don't want to miss the opportunity to have a great future together. I know what I did was wrong, but please give me the opportunity to prove to you that you can trust me." I looked at her like she was crazy. I said, "Margaret, you killed that chance by cheating. Let me say this again. I am not getting back together with you. 1. You need to stop coming to my home. 2. I have made my mind up. There is nothing you can say or do to make me change my mind." She then bows her head, then looks up again and said, "That's it?" I said, "Yes, that's it." She then turns and walks away, totally dejected. After that, I never saw Margaret again. The last I heard, she was still living at her parents' and even dating some guy that a couple of people said he is a bum. One day I am at work. I get a text from Margaret saying she misses me and still loves me, even though I don't want to be with her. I simply read it and deleted it. A couple more days go by and a friend of mine is having a party and invites me. I go with my friends and I see Margaret there. She comes up to me and says she wants to talk, but I ignore her completely. Later that night on the way home from the party, a few of us were driving back when we saw Margaret's car parked at an empty mall parking lot. I said, "Hey, that's Margaret's car," so we drive up. And as we get closer, we all witnessed her having sex with some guy. We surprised them and Margaret spots me looking at her. I just shook my head and realized at that moment, I made the right decision by not letting her back into my life. I looked at her and smiled and gave her a thumbs up. Needless to say, after seeing Margaret with that guy was definitely closure for me. I had already made my mind up that I was not getting back together with her. But, after that, my decision was solidified. Word had got out from some of my friends on what we saw, but that was the extent of it. Weeks go by and some of our mutual friends tell me they haven't seen or heard from Margaret since then. One day, I get a call from Margaret's mom saying that Margaret is moving out of state with her new boyfriend. I was surprised at the call, but her mom wanted to see how I was since all of the cheating came out. She told me she thought what her daughter did was horrible and she wished me the best. We talked for a few more minutes and then hang up. My workday continues. Then suddenly, Margaret walks into my office. I said, "What are you doing here?" She says she wanted to drop by and see me one last time. And she was in the area. She said, "I wanted to drop by and give you this letter." She puts the letter on my desk and walks out. After she leaves, I am sitting there surprised. She is still going through all of this trouble. And she has a new boyfriend. I pick up the letter and just stare at it. I am debating whether I should open it or not. What will it accomplish by me reading it? Probably nothing. So, I reached over my desk and put the letter in the shredder. I figured there's nothing for me to read or to consider. Margaret is past tense as far as I am concerned. I have the closure I need to move forward and not look back. I am proud of myself for sticking to my decision. As you can see, I am in a much better place now. It is so nice to be able to wake up, not wondering if she would cheat on me again, or what new lies she has come up with this time. I don't have to worry about what if. I am free. I can move on with my life without any guilt that I made the right decision, especially thanks to my dad for giving me sound advice. This concludes this Reddit relationship advice. This story is called Accident Attorney Gets Hammered for Her Infidelity. I actually thought I would never be on a forum, but here I am sharing my story of my wife of 15 years, who is a prominent accident attorney who had caught cheating on me with another attorney. I don't have any kids. She has a daughter from a previous relationship who shares a place with another woman. My wife never married and I am in my second marriage. My wife is 46 and I am 48. She had this attitude that she was invincible because she was an attorney and the judge would see things her way. Our bedroom life went straight to zero. Once I got injured on my job. I work construction and most of the time our jobs are seasonal. So when work is slow, I have to take odd jobs to make up for the lost wages. My wife was very supportive and attentive in the beginning. I wasn't mobile as much, and I had to depend on her in the beginning stages after many surgeries. My injury was, I fell from a scaffolding and broke my left arm and left leg and foot. I was in the hospital for a few weeks and had to have surgery to repair my arm, which they placed a metal rod in it. And in my leg, they had to put a steel plate and 6 screws. It was a very long process of healing. I was out of work for almost 2 years. My wife had to take on a lot more cases because we had bills that still had to be paid. She started working longer hours and sometimes she wouldn't come home until late at night. I would already be in bed because I was on so many different pain medications that I couldn't stay up later than 9 p.m. She would come home. Sometimes she would be in a bad mood and I would ask her what was wrong. And she would say that she was just tired from working all day. I started to notice little things that were odd. Like she would wear this perfume that I had never seen her wear before. And when I would ask her what it was, she would say, "Oh, I just found it at the store and I liked it, so I bought it." I also noticed that she was taking more showers than usual and she started working out more. I didn't think anything of it. After all, as a prominent accident attorney, she was swamped with accident cases. When she started her law career, she started out making almost $85,000 a year. Now, she has surpassed $150,000 a year and she has carried the load for us for the last 2 years. I never made as much money as she did. I made pretty decent money, but nowhere near my wife. My wife was the first to go to college in her family, and she was the first to become an attorney. And she was very proud of her accomplishments. I am very proud of her too, but I started to feel like I was not good enough for her because I didn't have a college degree and I felt like she was always working and I was just sitting at home, not doing anything. Over the last couple of months, I started noticing she would come home and text on her phone a lot. I really didn't think anything of it. I thought maybe she was talking to one of the other attorneys regarding the case or one of her girlfriends. One night when my wife came home from work, we talked for a little bit. Then she said she was going to take a shower and she left her phone on the kitchen counter. I usually don't look at her phone, but I did this time to my surprise. I couldn't get in. She had a password on it. My heart started beating fast because she has never had her phone locked the entire time we have been married. The next day, when my wife went to work, I asked a good friend of mine to come over to my place so I could talk to him. I told him what happened and he said, "If you suspect something, don't make any accusations without proof. Don't make the mistake I did." Then he said, "Listen, if you want, we can put a GPS tracker in our car to see if she is up to something. Or you could hire a private investigator." I told him, "No, I am not hiring a private investigator. I can't afford one." We agreed on the GPS tracker and decided when she came home, we would do it late at night while she was asleep. Well, my friend would install it. We have a 3-car garage that sits away from the house a little. The few days pass and my friend installed the GPS tracker app on my phone. And I didn't notice anything suspicious the first 3 days she was at work and the tracker showed her leaving work and coming straight home on the 4th night. That's when my suspicions were confirmed. My friend had come over a little after 9 p.m. and I made a comment to him that my wife is usually home by now. The first thing my friend said was, "Check the app." The GPS tracker showed that my wife was not at her job. She was in a residential area in a wealthy neighborhood that I knew she didn't have any business being in. I told my friend to drive there. We drove around the neighborhood until we saw her car parked in the driveway of a large home. We waited for about 30 minutes. Then we saw my wife walking towards the car. She was carrying a garment bag and a small suitcase. She put them in the trunk of her car. Then she got in the car and drove off. We followed her to a hotel. We waited for about an hour. Then we saw her come out of the hotel with a man. They were laughing and joking. And they all of a sudden kissed each other. My friend, who thinks fast on his feet, whipped out his phone and took a photo and a small video clip of them kissing. He looked over at me and said, "I am sorry, man." I had tears in my eyes. I was in shock. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I told him it was okay. I needed to see it with my own eyes to believe it. We sat there and watched as they got in her car and drove off. We followed them to a restaurant and we watched as they went inside. As they were walking into the restaurant, this man had his hands on my wife's butt. My friend just shook his head. I was fuming, but I couldn't do anything with a bum leg and bum arm from my fall. I told myself right then and there, I need to get a grip and start taking care of what I needed to. My friend told me if I needed a place to stay, I can stay with him until I get on my feet again. As the days went by, my friend and I continued to spy on my wife and get as much video and photos as we could. We later found out that the guy she was seeing is another attorney who works with her and he is married as well. But we both wondered where his wife was. Come to find out, his wife is in the hospital fighting COVID. So, my plan was to call an attorney here in Georgia, and he opened my eyes a little. First thing he said to me was, "If you file for divorce and you sleep with your wife, after you have filed, you won't get any alimony." I said to him, "Why is that?" He said, "If you sleep with her and you know she has cheated, you will not get any alimony. It means you have forgiven her. So, what do you want to do?" I told the attorney to go ahead and start the divorce process. And I would be filing for alimony as well. I immediately got on the phone with my friend and asked him to meet me at my house to help me pack some things while my wife was at work. She has been coming home late anyway, so we had time. I get to my house and my friend is already there. I just took most of my clothes, my computer and some other odds and ends and followed him to his place. At about 1:16 in the morning, my wife sends me a text and asks where I am. I don't respond. I just let her wonder. To my surprise, when I didn't respond to her text, she didn't reach out anymore. Maybe she knew something was up, I don't know. The next morning, my attorney calls me and says that my wife will be served with divorce papers soon, and he asked me what my living status was. I told him that I moved out of the house temporarily and I have not slept with my wife since I found out. Later in the day, my wife calls me. I don't answer and she left a voicemail asking me to please call her. She is worried about me. I am thinking, BS, she isn't worried about me. I simply called her back and told her I knew she has been cheating on me and I filed for divorce. She was blown away and she denied it. Of course, I told her I had proof and hung the phone up. Over the next few weeks, my wife was served with divorce papers. She was highly upset and told me in a text, "Good luck getting anything in the divorce." She displayed a side of her I never knew existed. She was saying, "I am a lawyer, I will make sure you don't get anything, you are nothing without me," just belittling me. At the divorce hearing, my lawyer presented evidence that my wife was cheating. She had a divorce lawyer as well, so he couldn't refute it. To make a long story short, I got spousal support for 7 years in the amount of $3,500 a month. My now ex-wife was livid. She thought just because she was an attorney, she would get her way. The judge also gave me 30 days to get the rest of my things out of the house. It only took me 2 days. My friend had a big enough home that I could put things in. His father had recently passed away and left him millions. And my friend also owned 2 coffee shops. I didn't care about the house. She could have it. And she made enough money to pay the mortgage on it. In the coming weeks, my friend and I learned that the wife of my now ex-wife's recovered from her battle with COVID and found out that my ex-wife was having an affair with her husband. She went to their law firm and confronted them both in front of the other attorneys. They didn't get fired, but they were both reprimanded. And my ex-wife was told that if anything like this ever happens again, she will be fired. The law firm didn't take kindly to that type of publicity. I found out in the craziest way. The wife of my ex-wife's AP called me one day and told me everything. I couldn't believe it, and to top off the crazy stuff, my ex-wife sent me a text, wanting to talk and offered to cook me dinner. I read the text and deleted it. Since the divorce and finding this all out, I have been getting better with my mobility, exercising more to regain my strength. My friend, who is a godson, offered me a job to help him run his 2 coffee shops. So, things are looking up for me. I won't be ready to date anyone for a few months. I am not mentally ready for that. I don't think I can trust any woman right now. Thank you everyone for all of the encouraging comments. If you enjoyed the story, please like, comment, and consider subscribing to the channel for more content. I sincerely appreciate. Ub told me that he never even considered voice-activated recorders until he talked to his nephew. Let's Go. Our marriage had always been built on a foundation of trust, love, and mutual respect. Over the years we had tackled countless challenges, always emerging stronger and more united. But the issue of open relationships had proven to be a divisive force, casting a dark shadow over our once happy union. It was an issue that had first surfaced a few years ago, and it had continued to rear its head in our discussions ever since. On that particular evening, the tension in the air was palpable as we sat down to have yet another conversation about open relationships. I felt a heavy sense of dread in the pit of my stomach as we began to discuss the topic, fearing that it might be the straw that broke the camel's back as I listened to my wife passionately argue in favor of the idea. I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of hurt and betrayal. It felt as though she was asking for permission to cheat on me, to break the sacred bond that we had spent nearly a decade nurturing. My mind raced with questions. Was our love not enough for her anymore? Was I no longer enough for her? I tried to maintain my composure, swallowing the hurt and anger that threatened to overwhelm me. I knew that this was an important conversation and I couldn't let my emotions get the best of me. I needed to express my feelings clearly and calmly in the hope that we could find some common ground and resolve this issue once and for all. I didn't marry you to share you, I told her, my voice steady but firm. I could see the irritation flicker across her face. But I continued. When we made our vows, we promised to be there for each other through thick and thin, to love and cherish one another, and to be faithful to each other. I don't believe that an open relationship aligns with those values, and I'm not willing to change them now. Her response was dismissive as she rolled her eyes and told me that I was overreacting. She insisted that exploring an open relationship wouldn't diminish our love for each other, and that it could even strengthen our bond by introducing new experiences into our lives. But I couldn't shake the feeling that allowing other people into our relationship would only serve to erode the trust and intimacy that we have built over the years. We argued long into the night, each of us growing more frustrated and hurt by the minute. By the time we finally went to bed, we were no closer to a resolution, and I couldn't help but feel as though a chasm had begun to form between us. Little did I know that this was only the beginning of our marital turmoil. As the weeks wore on, the rift between us only seemed to grow wider, our intimacy waned, with my wife becoming increasingly distant and uninterested in physical affection. I found myself lying awake at night, plagued by thoughts of her betraying me behind my back. She began spending more and more time with her friends from work, as well as reconnecting with old friends from her childhood. While I knew that it was healthy for both of us to maintain our own social lives, I couldn't help but feel an annoying sense of unease each time she went out without me. I found myself obsessively checking her social media, trying to glean some insight into her activities and the people she was spending time with. It was during this time of escalating suspicion that I had a casual conversation with my nephew about the latest technology in surveillance devices. He told me about voice-activated recorders and GPS trackers and how they could be used to discreetly monitor someone's activities. As he spoke, I felt a mixture of intrigue and guilt wash over me. The idea of spying on my wife made me deeply uncomfortable. But at the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss in our relationship. I desperately needed answers, and this seemed like the only way to get them without resorting to hiring a private investigator, which was an expense I couldn't afford. After conducting some research on the best devices available, I made the difficult decision to purchase 2 voice-activated recorders and a GPS tracker. When they arrived, I carefully installed them in her car, my hands shaking slightly as I grappled with the knowledge that I was invading her privacy. I knew that I was crossing a line, but I couldn't bear the thought of living in the dark any longer. For the first few days, I listened anxiously to the recordings, hoping to find some evidence that would either confirm or dispel my suspicions, but it wasn't until the end of the first week that I discovered the painful truth. My wife had been unfaithful to me. The sound of her voice mingled with those of the men she had been seeing was a gut-wrenching confirmation of my worst fears. I also found a conversation in which she badmouthed me to her friends, describing me as lame and boring. The betrayal cut deep, and I felt as though the wind had been knocked out of me. It was one thing to know that she had been unfaithful, but to hear her speak so disparagingly about me was a whole new level of hurt. As the initial shock began to wear off, I knew that I couldn't just sit idly by and let her continue to deceive me. I needed to take action and protect myself both emotionally and financially. I opened a separate bank account, careful not to arouse suspicion by transferring money from our joint account. I also began the process of distancing myself from her emotionally, no longer initiating physical contact or offering her any affection. With a heavy heart, I realized that our marriage was beyond repair, and it was time to take the necessary steps to end it. As difficult as it was to accept, I knew that I deserved better and that I needed to be strong in order to face the challenges that lay ahead. Determined to protect myself and my interests, I decided to consult an attorney. I presented him with the evidence I had gathered, the recordings of my wife's infidelity and her disparaging comments about me. I explained the situation and my desire to file for divorce. My attorney listened carefully, offering his sympathy and professional guidance on the best course of action. He informed me that while Michigan is a no-fault state, the evidence of her infidelity could potentially be used to my advantage in negotiating the terms of the divorce, especially when it came to alimony. He advised me to gather more evidence if possible to strengthen my case and ensure a fair outcome. Taking my attorney's advice to heart, I decided to gather more evidence of my wife's infidelity. I rented a car to follow her discreetly, ensuring that she wouldn't recognize me or become suspicious. As I trailed her movements, I documented everything I saw with my phone: photos of her kissing other men, videos of them holding hands and embracing, and even some of them groping her in public. It was excruciating to witness these intimate moments between my wife and other men, but I knew that it was necessary in order to protect myself during the divorce proceedings. With a growing sense of resolve, I forwarded all the evidence I had collected to my attorney. He assured me that this would significantly bolster my case and that he would do everything in his power to ensure a favorable outcome for me. With my evidence securely in my attorney's hands, I decided it was time to take the final step and file for divorce. My wife was served with the papers at her workplace, and her reaction was nothing short of explosive. She called me, her voice shaking with rage, hurling insults and accusations at me. But I refused to engage in her outburst, knowing that I had made the right decision and that there was no turning back now. In the meantime, I moved out of the house we had been renting, putting physical distance between us and giving myself the space I needed to process the emotional turmoil I was experiencing. It was a difficult transition, but I knew that it was a necessary step toward healing and rebuilding my life. The day of the divorce hearing arrived, and I steeled myself for the confrontation. My wife's attorney attempted to argue that I was required to pay alimony, but my attorney countered with the evidence I had gathered. He presented the photos, videos, and recordings demonstrating her infidelity and betrayal. The judge listened carefully to both sides before making a decision. In the end, he agreed with my attorney and denied her any financial support. Relief washed over me as I realized that the battle was finally over, and I could begin the process of rebuilding my life. In the months following the divorce, I learned through one of her friends that my ex-wife had moved in with one of the men she had cheated on me with. Her friend confided in me that the man was a deadbeat, unemployed, and contributed nothing to their household. It was a bittersweet revelation, but it also confirmed that I had made the right choice in ending the marriage. As I continued to heal, I began to rediscover my own sense of self and independence. I pursued hobbies and interests that I had neglected during our marriage, and I slowly started to rebuild my social circle. I reconnected with old friends and made new ones. With time, I felt ready to dip my toes back into the dating pool. I knew that I wasn't quite ready to commit to a serious relationship, but I was eager to explore the possibilities and meet new people. I tried my hand at online dating, attending singles events, and even accepting setups from well-meaning friends. I approached each new encounter with an open mind and heart, taking the time to learn about myself and what I wanted in a partner. There were moments of awkwardness and disappointment, but there were also moments of excitement and connection. Through it all, I reminded myself that I was on a journey of self-discovery and that each experience, good or bad, was a valuable lesson. As the months passed, I began to come to terms with the reality of my situation. I had survived the heartbreak of my marriage collapsing, and I had emerged stronger and tougher than before. I made a conscious effort to work on myself, attending therapy sessions and participating in support groups for divorced individuals. Through these experiences, I learned that healing is not an easy process, but rather a series of ups and downs. There were days when I felt like I had made great progress and others when I felt like I was back at square one. But I remained committed to my journey, trusting that with time and effort, I would find peace and happiness once again. As I continued to heal, I came to understand that my life was not defined by my failed marriage, but rather by the choices I made moving forward. I began to embrace my newfound freedom, allowing myself to dream and imagine a future that was entirely my own. I knew that I still had a long road ahead of me, but I was determined to make the most of the opportunities that lay before me. I started to set new goals for myself, both personally and professionally. I focused on my career as a city surveyor, pursuing opportunities for growth and development. I also made a conscious effort to maintain a healthy work-life balance, dedicating time to my hobbies, friendships, and self-care. Although I had been deeply hurt by my ex-wife's betrayal, I chose not to let it characterize my life or hold me back. Instead, I used it as a catalyst for growth and transformation, emerging as a stronger and tougher person. With each new day, I took another step forward on my journey toward healing, knowing that I was creating a new beginning for myself, one filled with hope, happiness, and endless possibilities. This story is called Cheating Flight Attendant Wants an Open Relationship. I have never been to a forum. I am 48 years old and my wife is 44 and we have been married for 15 years. We had a good relationship. At least I thought we did, but it has been almost 2 years since we have had any real intimacy. My wife had some childhood trauma way back when. I won't say what it was, but it's affected her for a good portion of her life. But with therapy she has been able to overcome most of it. One of the reasons we didn't have any kids was while she was going to therapy. She was on quite a bit of medication. Some of this medication has some serious side effects. But she really didn't have many setbacks from the medication before my wife became a flight attendant. She was helping her father run a gas station they owned. They had a falling out because she wanted more money. Her becoming a flight attendant came out of nowhere. She had lunch with a friend of hers who was a flight attendant and told her how lucrative the position can be. She told my wife that when she became a flight attendant, they started her out at $35,000 per year, but she told my wife the downside to being a flight attendant. It's hard to maintain a relationship in most cases. After that meeting, my wife and I talked about it. Since my wife had a necessary education of requirements, and I think the airlines required some additional schooling and training. She applied at 4 different airlines: Delta, United Airlines, Frontier Airlines, and Southwest Airlines. Delta was the only one that hired her at first. I was happy for her. She was making about the same as I was making at the time, and she kept getting raises every year. It seemed substantial raises, but what I didn't know then is that this job came with the price. My wife was gone a lot. It seemed like she was going every day, only coming home for a few days at a time. When she was home, she wasn't really present. I couldn't figure out why. After about the third year of her being a flight attendant is when I noticed her behavior slightly shifting. She would come home and we would have a few days of bliss. But it seemed like the second week she was back home. She was thought to get strange. Not only did her behavior change, her spending habits also changed. She was buying a lot of sexy clothes, but I didn't see her in those clothes. I started to get suspicious. But I didn't want to accuse her of anything. I wanted to make sure before I confront her with indisputable evidence. So as the weeks and months go by, she is still traveling, coming home, not touching me, and spending lots of money on clothing. Well, I had lunch with a friend one day and told him what was happening. He travels quite a bit himself, and he honestly said, "I don't know what I can tell you." Then he said, "If she is cheating on you away from home, how will you find out?" He said hiring a private investigator may be your only option, but it's going to be expensive. He was right. I knew it would be expensive. So I called around to a few places, actually found a husband and wife team that were private investigators. After work, I went to see them and told them all of my suspicions. She wasn't initiating anything with me in the bedroom, buying clothes and not wearing them in front of me. Then this guy's wife said, "What does she do for a living?" I said, "She's a flight attendant." She shakes her head and said, "Sir, I don't have a good feeling about what you told me." My heart just sank after she said that. I told them I needed to find out what was going on. They gave me their price. It would cost me almost $7,000 to follow her while she was traveling and get the video footage. They told me to go home and think about it and get back to them when I have the opportunity. I went back home and to my surprise my wife wanted to talk to me, and it wasn't pleasant. She basically told me, not in so many words. She was not happy with our sex life and wanted to explore an open relationship. I said, "What the hell do you mean?" She says, "I want to see other men." I basically told her, "No way. I am not doing that." Then she says, "So you want me to be unhappy with our boring sex life?" I said, "No, I don't want you to be unhappy. But I am not willing to accept that I am not participating in an open relationship." Well, as you guessed, that conversation didn't resolve anything. We went to bed not speaking to one another that night. The next day I met with the husband and wife team that are private investigators and pay them their fee of $7,000. The husband was going to stay behind and his wife was going to travel and do the surveillance. I told them my wife was leaving on a certain day. I gave them a picture of her, what kind of car she drove and where she usually hangs out when she is home. Over the next few days, before she was due to travel again, their surveillance showed her on her cell phone a lot and going to the mall on occasion. Mostly by herself on the day she was traveling. The private investigators sent me a text showing my wife walking next to a man, and they were walking rather quickly. I assumed to make sure they made the flight. The private investigators simply asked me, did I know this man? I simply replied that I didn't, so the private investigators sent me a text saying from that point on she was documenting everything and would be in touch as soon as they landed. Later that night the private investigators said that my wife and the same guy she boarded the plane with went to a hotel which had a bar in it. They had drinks and then went up to the hotel room together. The next day the private investigators sent me a text saying that my wife had checked out of the hotel by herself at around 11 in the morning. But she said that wasn't enough. She wanted to get them together, embracing, kissing, something, words that I didn't want to hear, but my gut was telling me she was cheating while the private investigator was telling me all this. I still had to somehow focus at work. I work as a computer analyst and my job is stressful enough. I get home that night around 9 p.m. and the private investigator called me. She had footage of my wife and this guy embracing each other outside the hotel, kissing for about 15 minutes before getting into a cab together and leaving. My world came crashing down that very moment. I sat in my living room almost lifelessly, pondering how to proceed from here. That's when I decided there is only one thing I can do now, is file for divorce. but I wasn't going to let her know that I was filing for divorce. That night I started researching laws related to adultery as well as divorce laws in my state, in which is Arizona. To my surprise, it's a class 3 misdemeanor, but I didn't want to do that. I found a lawyer and met with her right away. I told a lawyer I already had a private investigator on the job, and I gave the lawyer some of the footage the private investigator had, and she will be giving me more footage. I paid the retainer to the lawyer, and she said she would help me proceed with the divorce when I am ready and also get her more proof of my wife's infidelity. So, after leaving the lawyer's office, my private investigator has sent me a text asking me to call her, so I did. She tells me she is going to end the investigation. I asked her why. She says what I am about to send to you is probably enough for you to divorce your wife. My heart just started racing. She sends me a clip of them having sex in the back of a rental car, and she says if you want more footage she can, but reiterated that she really didn't need to go any further, and I agreed. But after she said that she told me she was going to find out who this guy was and get information on him as well. At this point I was so broken. My heart just stopped beating at the sight of this video. My wife was soon to come back in 4 days, so I had to start planning on what I needed to do as soon as possible. One of the first things I did was remove her from all of my credit cards. She hardly used them, but just a precaution. I removed her. Second, she was a beneficiary on my insurance policy. I removed her from being a beneficiary and made my mom the beneficiary temporarily to my credit. We never commingled funds, meaning we always had separate bank accounts. So I didn't need to do anything there since we both owned the house. I knew I couldn't just kick her out, so I asked my lawyer, what should I do in this situation? She said the house is community property and will be split between both parties. Once my lawyer told me that, I started looking for another place to stay and found a place that was close to my mom's house. Fast forward a day, I get a call from my private investigator. She tells me that my wife's AP is married, owns a used car dealership, and has 2 kids, and has another business with someone else. She told me she sent a packet to me with all of his information and his address. So that day I had my lawyer file for divorce on the grounds of adultery, and I started packing my things. My soon-to-be ex-wife was due to come back in 2 days. The next step was to get this packet to this guy's wife and get it to her before he returns. I got off work that evening and went to her house and knocked on the door. She answered through her Ring doorbell, asking who I was and what I wanted. I just came out and said, "Ma'am, I think your husband is having an affair with my wife, and I have proof." Needless to say, her door opened with lightning speed when I saw her. I just handed her the packet and walked away. The next day, my wife was scheduled to come home, so that morning I took off work to move some of my things to storage just to be out of the house until my apartment was ready. I had to stay with my mom for a few weeks until then. The next step was to get home with the second packet before my wife did and leave it on the dining room table for her to see. I was pretty much moved out by then. I eventually got home before my wife did and left the packet on the table. By the time 7 p.m. rolled around, I had over 200 calls on my phone and doubled that amount in text messages. She called me and sent me text messages up until midnight. I didn't answer her calls or respond to her text messages. I was mad and done. At the same time, a few days later, my wife was served with divorce papers, and I did not hear from her when she did get them. Fast forward a week and my attorney calls me and says my soon-to-be ex-wife isn't asking for anything too crazy in the divorce. No alimony, she just wants 1 car and her half of the equity in the house. At the divorce hearing it was quick and painless. We agreed to split the equity in the home. I agreed to give her one of the cars we owned, and we agreed to split some of the belongings in the house. About 4 months after the divorce, I learned that my ex-wife's AP was arrested on federal fraud charges. Apparently, he was fraudulently obtaining government contracts with his business partner. And I also learned that my ex-wife never stopped seeing her AP even when she was blowing up my phone that night and professing her love for me. 2 months later, we sold the house and split the equity we had in the house. When I was at the closing, she was trying to talk to me. I simply told her we don't have anything to discuss outside of the sale of the house. After that, I never heard from or saw her again. Last I heard, she was still a flight attendant and she may have been involved in her AP's fraud case. When I got this story, I was told to leave the names out for privacy reasons. In my opinion, I don't think I would have spent $7,000 for a private investigator, but his private investigator had to travel to get proof, which really didn't matter anyway, because his ex-wife only wanted a few things, including the equity in the home. I imagine he recouped that $7,000 he spent from the sale of the house. I don't think he was a simp in this case. In my personal opinion, I think he handled the situation the best way he thought he should have handled it. He didn't lose a lot of money and his divorce was quick. Today I'll share with you guys how I brought my own wedding to a screeching halt when I read my vows. My fiancé and I met in a group setting through coworkers. One of our friends was a man named David. He was my best friend, so it was really nice that he got along with the girl I started dating and eventually proposed to. He quickly agreed to be my best man at the wedding. When my fiancée found out, she was really happy and said it would be perfect. I suspected her bit, but not enough to ask about it. She was friends with him too, after all. Well, fast forward to the week before our wedding. My soon-to-be bride was really excited and had been on her phone a lot. I assumed it was all wedding-related planning because she'd be on her phone and stop me in my tracks to ask what I'd prefer between the two choices. These choices didn't really matter to me by answer to make her happy. Now that I know what I know, I think she would make up things to ask me so that I wouldn't suspect her of communicating with another man. My best man, to be specific. She and I held our bachelor parties on the same night. It was extremely disappointing to me when my best man called me to let me know he couldn't attend the bachelor party he planned for me. He told me his mother was in the hospital unexpectedly and he needed to be there with her. Well, this was totally forgivable, right? How could I be so heartless to deny or suspect him? I still had several friends with me throughout the night. I'm an active guy, so we all played basketball outside before getting cleaned up real nice and going to an upscale lounge downtown. I felt like royalty and I hoped my fiancé was feeling the same way. We were actually already living together at this point, but we agreed to abstain from sex the month before the wedding. I had no idea how difficult that was going to be. We took turns each night sleeping on the pull-out bed in the living room. When I arrived home that night, my fiancée was already home and crashed on our bed. She looked like an angel that partied for the first time tonight. I tucked her in while she slept, but as I looked around I noticed something shiny on the floor by the edge of the bed. I picked it up and held it in my hand, looking closely. It was a fancy gold cufflink. How interesting. My wheels immediately started turning. My woman did not own any cufflinks, and I only owned one pair that did not look like this one. That could mean another man was in our bedroom. I started impulsively rubbing my face, head, and neck. This was stressful. Just then, my fiancé's phone went off. It was set to vibrate only, but I could hear it on the nightstand. While she slept, I stood beside her and read her messages. The string that stood out was the one with my best man. The most recent text was from him, 4 hours earlier at 9 p.m. As I scrolled up, I realized she invited him to her bachelorette party, even though that wasn't normally how these things worked. Further up was much worse. She told him that tonight was going to be their night, because the next day she would belong to me. He asked her if he'd ever be able to have her again. She said if he tempted her too much, he might get away with it. Messages from months ago showed how their conversation went from strictly friends to flirty. He started asking about her body, and she started showing him. They made arrangements to hang out one day. A day that I thought she was at work. And then he messaged her, asking if they should have done that. She replied with, "I've never been more sure of anything." Just like that, within 1 hour, I went from a blissful man about to be married, to a broken-hearted fool plotting revenge. I sent myself 6 screenshots of the worst messages they sent, obviously escalating in severity. My plan was to read these messages when I was supposed to read my vows. This was going to be terrible. Just like what she did to me was terrible. I deleted all traces of me collecting evidence, then I took some NyQuil and crashed. The next morning, she was already gone. She left me an old-fashioned handwritten note that said she left early to get her hair and makeup done. Imagine getting all dressed up, only for someone to announce that you're a cheater in front of all your friends and family. What a great day. At this point, I was only bitter. I didn't miss her or want her to be sorry. I was ready to dump her because I couldn't believe how much she let me love her. She was my only one, and I was one of two. I got dressed really nicely. I smelled wonderful, and my hair was never so on point. A part of me felt like it was for nothing, but I convinced myself it was worth it. I thought about warning my dad about what I planned to do, but I didn't want him to convince me not to or warn other people. Just then, my best friend texted me to ask if I was on my way to the venue. As soon as I got there, he greeted me outside. He was dressed really nicely, but the only thing I wanted to know was if he had cufflinks. In a gamble, I pretended to notice he was missing one, even though I couldn't really tell. He was surprised I noticed and looked embarrassed. He said it must have got caught on something somewhere because he lost it. I asked to see the one he had up close, in case I happened to find the match. At this point, his heart was trying to get out of his chest. He was sweating. I was so amused by this, but played dumb. He showed me the cufflink, and it was an exact match to the one I found and had in my pocket that very moment. I looked up at him very seriously for a few agonizing seconds. I was trying to stop myself from screaming or punching him. He could see it and asked me if I was okay. I snapped myself out of it and plastered on a fake smile. I told him of course I was okay. I was getting married today. I slapped him so hard on the back that it made him jump. I just walked into the venue. After the mind-numbing mingling and grand procession, I realized I never wanted to have a traditional wedding ever again. It all seemed so stupid and meaningless. That's when my would-be wife walked down the aisle. She was as beautiful as ever, and all the memories of how we met and how long we'd been together poured into my head. It was extremely unfair, and I sobbed. People around me seemed to notice that I wasn't happy crying. I was devastated. I barely controlled my sobs until the point where the celebrant asked me if I'd like to read my vows. This was it. I started reading messages between James and my fiancé. I mentioned the date and time of each one. It was just odd at first for everyone to be waiting patiently for me to get to the point. But then, as they listened, I started to read messages that were flirty and not something either of them would be proud of. They started to shift uncomfortably and looked around, noticing that everyone in the building was staring at them. My bride asked me what I was doing and what I was reading. After another text, she told me to stop. Then I read the really inappropriate messages. Him telling her he needed to bury himself inside her again, and her telling him to come over because I left the house. By now, everyone was talking amongst themselves, and my fiancé was trying to grab my phone from me. My best man suddenly walked out, but he was followed by 5 of my groomsmen. As she tried to grab my phone, I shouted that I had pictures and videos they'd send each other if anyone wanted to see them. That's when people started getting up and leaving. The celebrant asked if we were still getting married, and I laughed loudly and sarcastically. My ex was now on her knees in her white dress, sobbing at the altar. Her bridesmaids had no idea what to do. They just stood there, frozen. Some of them might have known she was sleeping with him or at least saw them being flirty. It was great to see that no one rushed to her side to help her feel better. I went outside to see what had become of my best man. His car was trapped between the 5 men. They were yelling and screaming at him, in disbelief that he would betray me as he did. At this point, I was done with all the drama. My head hurt, I felt like I got the revenge I wanted and just needed to take a nap. I told them to back off and let him go, that keeping him here wasn't going to help anything. Just as they backed off, my would-be bride came running out of the venue. She was being chased by her bridesmaids as they shunned her, calling her a terrible person. She ran behind the best man's car for about 10 yards before he saw her in the mirror and stopped. She got in and they left. I turned around and saw a majority of our wedding guests watching what just happened. Many of them walked up to me and offered me hugs and words of advice. It was weird, it was like I was suddenly in a grief counseling session with a mixture of our family and friends. Well, they weren't her friends anymore. Neither of them received support or contact from the people they once relied on and knew so well. They moved out of state together, but only lived together for 1 year. After that, my ex moved back in with her disappointed and criticizing parents. What a gigantic waste of time. She tried to ask me out again after all this, and I called her crazy. I still haven't heard from my best friend, but that's fine. I couldn't be friends with him anymore anyway. My friends and family never let me give up hope or get too depressed. I haven't started dating again, but I know a good girl I'm gonna ask out. It's hard to believe that someone would be with me and only me. That's because my ex planted a seed of doubt. The only way I know to fight this doubt is to take my time getting close to people. Ask them anything I want to know and tell them what's happened to me so they understand where I'm coming from. Wow, OP. Not many people experience the level of stress you went through here. I love how you had the strength and determination to collect and read messages at the wedding for all to hear. I think it was the best way for her to learn from her mistake. I'm so glad to hear that you had so much support on that day and afterward. You did not deserve to be betrayed like this by your best friend and fiancé of all people. I enjoyed listening to your story and finding that even though they escaped criticism together, they didn't last very long. That had to add another sting of guilt to each of them. I think at that point they definitely realized they screwed up their own lives too, not just everyone they held dear. It sounds like you know how to keep moving forward. Thank you so much for sharing this with us, OP. We appreciate you and your resilient emotional recovery. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's story. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. My girlfriend was a very superficial girl. She was going to a beauty school to become a hair and makeup artist. I was going to school to become an engineer. I didn't think any less of her for what her career choice was. She was lovely and charming, like Snow White, and cared about the people she encountered. At least, that was what she let me see of her. I took her to a family reunion after we dated for a year, and my mom got some one-on-one time with her in the kitchen. She reported back to me, telling me to dump this girl as fast as possible. I was shocked by the impression she got, and thought my mom was crazy when she told me my girlfriend was extremely rude, selfish, and inconsiderate. I just didn't see what she saw, so I couldn't bring myself to break up with her. She kept surprising me at my dorm with food, movie rentals, or games to play. She also looked forward to any chance I got to take her out clubbing. Usually, I was busy dedicating myself to my studies. I knew my college education would require sheer determination, strength, and focus. Graduation means I wasn't distracted by a woman, or God forbid, getting one pregnant. I knew my girlfriend didn't want to conceive, but she swore she could time her cycle, so there were a few times she persuaded me not to wear protection. One night, my girlfriend tried really hard to convince me to take her out to a venue that had live music and cheap drinks. I told her I couldn't and maintained my resolve. She got pretty upset with me, and I saw her face fade from smiling and adorable to a resentful frown with piercing eye contact. She left without another word, but it made me mad because she strutted out with her angry supermodel walk. It seemed obvious she planned to go without me, which made it impossible for me to focus on studying. I drove to the venue 30 minutes later and spotted her on the dance floor with another man, surrounded by sweaty people. I watched her and kept my distance while I had a drink. I was curious to see the side of her that my mom warned me about. I didn't believe she'd be so low to cheat on me. She valued me as her man and admired my mind. I thought she wanted a secure and happy future with me. What I saw proved the opposite. She was acting like the most gorgeous and newly single woman in the place. It was only a short time before she let the man she was dancing with lead her back to the bar, where they did one more shot before leaving together. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I followed his car while he drove poorly and failed to notice my tailing him. I parked just about 200 feet behind them, so I saw them go into his apartment. I knocked on the door 20 minutes later after deciding it was what I wanted to do. No one answered, even though I know they heard me. Eventually, he answered the door, and when my girlfriend saw me, she tried to look happy and calm. She said this wasn't what I thought it was, that he was actually her gay stepbrother, and they hung out sometimes. He looked at her like she was crazy. She shoved past him to leave with me and closed the door in his face. We started walking away, but AP didn't want to play along. He felt used and embarrassed. He opened the door again to shout that he was sorry for sleeping with my girlfriend, and she told him she was single. I pulled away from her, and she just kept saying that it wasn't true. I told her that even if she didn't sleep with him, I knew he wasn't her gay stepbrother, and I saw the way she danced with him at the club. That was enough for me to believe what my mom said about her. She said I was being unfair because she claimed to be innocent, but I refused to be made a fool for trusting her after this weird night and my mom's warning. I left her there, right by AP's house. She posted dramatic things about me on Facebook, that I left her in the nowhere in the middle of the night, and that I accused her of cheating when she wasn't that kind of person. I felt a little helpless about all the bashing, but I ultimately didn't care because I knew who I was and what I wanted to become. I went back to my studies and forgot all about my ex-girlfriend. To my surprise, just 4 months later, she posted on Facebook with the happy news that she was expecting. 1 hour later, she was publicly freaking out because AP dumped her and accused her of cheating. Apparently, AP couldn't have children, so he knew he was not the father, even though my ex tried to claim he was. It was a huge mess, and I'm glad I got out of the whole situation when I did. My mom was relieved too. Years later, I'm working as an engineer, and my ex is a single mother of 2 that never obtained her cosmetology degree. OP, I am sorry your girlfriend proved herself to be a selfish and manipulative woman. You dodged a bullet, thanks to your mother's warning and girlfriend's telling behavior. It worked out really well to follow her that night, and it was the only time you had to because you were too smart to be playing these games. She was extremely immature, and it worries me to think about all the men she'll probably trick into loving her. Unless, through some miracle, she learns her lesson and becomes a trustworthy woman. Now she has her kids to consider and put above her own desires. Sometimes it takes a shocking life mistake like this to realize the world doesn't bend to your wishes, and you'll get yourself into a bad place if you think selfishly or take advantage of others. Thank you for sharing your story. Now let's get into our second story for today. I, 41, didn't realize that my wife, 35, was talking to several other men behind my back. The man she talked to the longest paid her for pictures and videos when we were struggling financially. We had 3 kids, one of them nearly an adult, and we were married for 10 years. After she felt like she could get away with talking to AP behind my back, she started making up stories for places she had to go to. One night she told me she was going to get her hair done, and she did, but it took a long time. Another time, this could have happened many times. While I was at work and the kids were at school, she spent the day with him. He was like her sugar daddy. I didn't know she was sneaking out or doing anything behind my back until I got a call from a married woman we were both friends with for about 7 years. She was crying and said she just found out her husband was cheating on her. I was shocked to hear this and told her I was so sorry. I was shocked because when I spent time with her husband, he told me how much he loved his wife. I recalled one time we were alone together and he spoke highly of his wife and then asked me how my wife felt, but then he corrected himself to how I felt about my wife. Right after this memory, she told me my wife was the one sleeping with him. I instantly understood why she was calling me. I had a vision of my heart plopping onto a platter and a fork stabbing it, then a knife cutting into it. I asked her how she knew and she said she was holding her husband's phone at that very moment. He forgot it when he said he was going to meet some friends. She tells me she was looking at their messages right now and he lied. He was going to meet my wife at a book club. Hearing her mention the book club made it all too real. That was definitely my wife's thing. She would go every week, but she never invited me to go. I wasn't much of a reader. AP's wife sent me pictures of what was going on while I drove to the book club. These messages mentioned times they had sex, things they wanted to do, and risk pictures. They were all about to get a rude awakening. I busted down the door and found 8 women, all intently and dreamily listening to AP, the only man in the room, reading a romance novel out loud. My wife was wrapped around his arm with her head on his shoulder. The room gasped and looked at me when I walked in. My wife jumped straight to standing and AP looked like his worst fears were realized. I looked him dead in the eye and said his wife knew what he was doing. He could only say no, but I said yes and added that she sent me the messages between him and you. I pointed to my wife, then AP ran out the door. My wife covered her mouth and all the other women stared with gaping mouths as this unfolded. I told her she made a vow to me 10 years ago and gave birth to my children only for our marriage to end like this. My voice cracked and tears started flowing. I told her she ruined 2 marriages and I never wanted her to come back into my home again. She very quietly said that this didn't have to happen because she was sorry and learned her lesson. I told her I didn't give a crap if she learned her lesson. That would only benefit her future, but now I had to pick up the pieces of my own life, the life that she gave up for another man. Then I left. One of the women chased me down and handed me a little piece of paper with her phone number on it. All the other women started whispering and awkwardly leaving, itching to spread the word around town about the book club breakup. As soon as I got home, I realized this building didn't feel like home anymore, just a grave of the life I was living. So I packed up the kids and everything I could over the next few days and with my brother's help, moved into my parents' house 3 hours away. This was what I needed to do while I divorced my wife and got financially situated to the point where I could buy a new home. Meanwhile, AP was divorced and moved in with my ex. They probably thought everything was going to be okay for them until they were both ordered to pay child support. But that's not all. AP found out just a few weeks later that he wasn't my wife's only lover, and after some thought, she decided she could do better than him. She moved out, leaving him broke and the sole person living in our old marital home. She moved in with some dangerously rich man. She was treated pretty well there at first and they actually decided to have a baby together. However, while the paint was drying in the nursery, my wife's new husband cheated on her. Then he wanted the new woman to be his wife and have his babies. So he kicked out my ex, providing her the money for an abortion. I don't know if any of you guys believe in karma, but I am certain that's what happened here. My wife wanted the money and didn't give a crap about anyone else. So that's literally what she got. Temporary riches from someone that didn't give a crap about her. I've since bought a new place and remarried. I thought I should share this story to inspire people, particularly men, who were betrayed by a woman that they trusted. As much as it hurts, we are strong enough to get through it. Men are meant to take the hardest crap dealt in the world. We don't even need much to keep on going. But if a woman fails you, just get another one. I know that sounds heartless, but I was able to do just that very thing. No matter what you're faced with, always be communicative and caring while knowing your own boundaries and what you deserve. That's how you just keep surviving and functioning. OP, I am glad to hear that justice was served to your cheating wife. There may not be such a thing as 2 souls destined for each other, but as mature adults, we each have the chance and responsibility to wisely choose the partner we want to commit to and love, no matter what. The person that matches us as closely as possible, among other factors. And when it seems to be getting boring or difficult, you fight to rekindle the love and commitment that you found in each other. If there are things to talk about them. That's how you solve things that are causing problems, no matter how painful, humiliating, or uncertain it is. And if there aren't any vow-breaking problems, and there's still love in the relationship, then there's no reason to betray. Them being bored, under stress, or tempted by another person certainly is not enough to put your loved one through a tragic life event they must overcome. I'm glad to hear you've overcome this extremely difficult time in your life. Remember, you are worthy of all the love and happiness you find. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. Hey folks, welcome back to my channel Relationship Haven. In today's story, OP found out his girlfriend cheated on him with a coworker, then ran off with her affair partner. Now, recently OP's father passed away from cancer and his cheating girlfriend has the nerve to want to show up at his dad's funeral with her affair partner. OP then exposed her motive to people around them, friends and family, as well as the internet, and now her reputation has been completely destroyed. Let's get into today's story to find out what happened. A little background. I met her 5 years ago. We have been together for the last 3 of those years. The first 2 were spent just casually dating. I love this girl. We did have arguments a little more frequently lately, but that's because of my insecurities lately. See, about a year ago, I was going through a death in the family and I wasn't able to be there for her. We decided to take a break for a few weeks, a mutual decision, and for me to get my head on straight. We talked often during these weeks, nothing deep, as we wanted to give each other space. Weeks after we got back together, I found out she started flirting with a coworker. They went out a couple of times. She went down on him, too. She also showed me the texts. We worked through it, but I've always felt insecure as they see each other every day. A few days ago, we had a fight. We had made plans, and she cancelled the day of. She has a habit of doing so last minute, and it annoys me, but whatever. So later, we talked, and I asked how her day was, etc. She sent me a few pictures, and I see a restaurant in the background. When we met later, I asked her about who she was with, and she didn't exactly answer, but after taking it upon myself to look through her texts, I saw a conversation with the same coworker talking about having lunch together at a very unique type of restaurant, the same type that was in the background. I was so mad. I asked if it was him, and she repeatedly said no. I left and went home. I woke up and saw I was blocked everywhere. I decided not to bother her as we both needed time to calm down. Today, I decided to look at her Facebook page through someone else's account. It said she's in a relationship. The coworker's account said the same. For context, when we were together, she never once put in a relationship, but I didn't care. It's only Facebook. Suddenly, her and the coworker who showed single are now both in a relationship. I've messaged her friends and everyone she knows, but no one is responding. What do? I can't work. I can't eat or sleep. If she broke up with me, I'd be okay, but she chose to do it in such a way. I need answers. I need someone to tell me what's going on. I feel like I'm starting to come off as a crazy person, but what am I supposed to do? Update. It's been over a week since I found out my ex-girlfriend and best friend of 5 years had been having a long-term affair with her coworker. She ghosted me when I found out. First things first, you people saved my life. I admit I was having very dark thoughts during those first few days, and the words and sentiments of you folks helped me trudge along. I finally told my family and friends. Some of them already knew as our friend group was sort of blended after 5 years. To say my mother was hurt was an understatement. She loved my ex and thought I would marry her. I had taken your advice and just went completely silent. I purged my house of everything that reminded me of her, everything she got me or left here, packed it in boxes, and asked one of my friends to deliver it to one of hers. I wanted to be proactive. When my friend got back, he told her friend an earful about how I had been treated. I didn't ask him to. Apparently she was apologetic. She supposedly didn't know my ex cheated. Yeah, right. I think she just doesn't want to look bad now that it's coming out. The ex is a cheater. No way she didn't know, but whatever. Yesterday, a blank random Facebook account messaged me. It was my ex. Here's what she said. Hi, I got the stuff from Talia. I get you're probably mad at me. I get that I messed up by not breaking up sooner before things happened, but I think it's really cruel of you to tell people our business and even return things I got you as gifts. They were meant for you. There was no reason to be so ugly about everything. This is exactly why I did not say anything. I really think me just disappearing will help you move on faster. There's no reason for it. One day I hope we could both look back on our relationship fondly as something that helped us become better people. I hope you can reach that point in yourself. I ignored the message and then blocked her. I've got my appetite back. I still have moments where I just can't help but break down, but I feel anger more than anything else. I'm burying myself in work, and most of my interactions with people involve a good deal of faking it, but I'll get there someday. What worries me is my anger. Here's another update. A few days ago, my dad passed away. Somehow, my ex found out. On social media, I have received such an outpouring of support from and some of them are friends with her friends. My friends already know not to talk to me about her or share anything about me with her or her friends. My mother is broken. My ex, who has been blocked by my mother and family, decided to text my mother her condolences. She went so far as to imply that being the caring person she is, she'd like to offer my mother her support and attend the funeral. Guess who with? If you guessed the affair partner, then you're right. Why? Because she will support her while she's supporting my mother. This sucks because my mom loved her and they were close until she cheated. My mom didn't even bother responding. She just told me what happened, told me she doesn't want her there or to reach out again and will leave it to me to handle it because she doesn't want unnecessary drama after all this. Now, I have no choice but to confront her. I also know confronting her is giving her exactly what she wants. She'll be able to say I'm the one reaching out to her. What should I do? What should I say? I have not dealt with it yet, but I plan to. Here's yet another update. First of all, thank you all so much for your condolences. I'd have loved to answer each one of you individually. Thank you all from the bottom of my and the family's hearts. I took all your advice into consideration. At the end of the day, regardless of the harsh way I personally want to put my ex in her place, I think I see things my mother's way. I don't want any sort of conflict or ill will or cruel words spoken about the circumstances in which I'm putting Dad to rest. I just want peace until after the funeral. I decided I'll not respond to her in any way. I've also spoken to my family through the group to tell them about what happened. Understandably, many were angry and wanted to rip her a new one. I pleaded with them to restrain themselves and that we needed to stand in solidarity and agree we all will meet her attempts with complete silence. I got all of them to agree that if she reaches out to them, we'll just ignore and block as many times as necessary. We won't even acknowledge she exists. Everyone's so protective of me now, so there's a new unity to the family that's really humbling. I'll speak to the funeral personnel about the ex to make sure in case she does show up, she'll be turned away. I'll go to the police station tomorrow to at least inform them just in case. Maybe they can advise me as well. If a restraining order is my only recourse, I'll take steps in that direction. Lastly, when I told my friends about it, they weren't surprised. Turns out my ex is posting about being devastated by the loss of my dad and is soaking up the pity like a leech. My friends had already agreed amongst themselves to keep this under wraps, to not stress me out. They volunteered to be spokesmen and spread the word to literally everyone that she isn't welcome and that we'll have security to keep her out if need be. They'll also run interference for me the whole day. I was really touched. Right now, my priority is making sure my mom isn't affected by anything else. I'm staying with her until the funeral. She's a really religious woman, so she doesn't want to be too harsh with the ex and says she's forgiven her or is trying to, so the best she can do is continue to just ignore her. I'll update after the burial. Here's my final update. My dad's funeral service was beautiful. One of his close friends asked if he could put up the time and location on his social media so my dad's friends out of state could see and attend, and they did. Fortunately, I did not hear a peep from my ex in the days leading up to it, and I didn't care to. Her parents did attend, though. They didn't stay long, and they mostly spoke with my mom, but I hovered around her the whole day just in case. Not a word was mentioned about my ex. They were cordial with me, and I didn't get the sense they were unhappy with me, but they had the tact not to talk about anything else. It was sweet, honestly. In the last few days, I've gotten a few friend requests from people in my ex's camp, but I ignored it. Yesterday, my friend, same guy I asked to return her stuff, showed me a message from Talia that is basically spewing hate my way. Talia, her friend, said that I'm immature, pathetic, and trying to make my ex's life miserable. I asked them to extract what this was all about, and she sent me a screenshot of a YouTube video shared by one of our friends to her. It didn't take long for it to reach my ex, and wow, out of curiosity, I decided to accept one or two of the friend requests, and this is what happened. I've gotten pages of my ex calling me abusive for not having the courage to face the woman I'm besmirching, but dragging her name through incel echo chambers. And that I not only denied her the opportunity to say bye to my dad, but talked openly enough about her private business that it's trickling into her workmates' conversation. She then said that as if that isn't bad enough, I'm psychologically attacking her by encouraging strangers on the internet to bash her. Her accusations honestly got under my skin, and I responded only to ask what about the post wasn't true. I tried to explain that I first made the post in a moment of immense emotional upheaval and panic, and I just needed advice from people who suffered through the same, and that I did not reveal anything to expose her or myself to strangers, but she was adamant. I was told my ex apparently cried when she heard some of the comments, and said that her new boyfriend wants to settle things with me. He wants me to reach out to my ex and apologize to her. I'm tired, honestly. I don't care about talking to her, and I honestly don't think I have to justify making an anonymous post on Reddit to sort through what was a difficult time for me. What struck me most is that the cousin, who I honestly feel was in contact with the ex while talking to me, was more offended at what commenter said than what I did. She couldn't pick out a single thing I lied about, not one. Thank you all for the support you have given me these last few months. This community has been among my most resolute supporters, giving me strength with your own stories of betrayal and perseverance. Even some of the harsher advice was incredibly useful to me. I truly believe if I had every last one of you in my ear a year ago, I'd have been spared so much pain that I now believe in part was self-inflicted. You're the best. Wow, OP. The entitlement that your ex has is unbelievable. The fact that she felt the need to show up at your dad's funeral means that she must be a full-blown narcissist. If I were you, I would continue to ignore her and try your best to move on from this situation. If anything, consider the fact that she found out her story was exposed on the internet as a good thing. Hopefully, it can help her narcissistic mind realize the disaster she has created and will for once feel an ounce of remorse. I wish you all the best, OP. Thanks for taking the time to listen to today's story. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already and comment below on what your thoughts are on today's story. If there's a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. Take care,